Okay, I think we just start right off. Welcome to this session. It's called The Migration Path to HTML5. I'm Jan Petzold, coming from Germany, from Deutsche Welle, Germany's international broadcaster. And this session is mainly about the challenges we had and the challenges we have by making an HTML5 friendly offer. And I assume that not everybody here in this audience knows Deutsche Welle, so I'd like to give a quick introduction about us. The image that you see here is, it's called our multi-platform strategy. I think it's pretty much common sense nowadays. So what do we do at Deutsche Welle? We are a content provider. We are producing and publishing content. And of course, one of our main interests is to publish the content in many different ways. So we're not just doing online video, we're doing live streams. We have various TV stations, radio programming. We're having a mobile application for Android, iPhone, and so on. We're doing hundreds of podcasts, IPTV corporations, social web, and we have a website in 30 different languages. So this is mainly what we do, and I think this image illustrates it in a really nice way. Some basic facts and figures. As I said, we're Germany's international broadcaster, founded in 1953. We have a global reach of more than 86 million weekly listeners and viewers. Studios in Brussels, in Washington, and Moscow. In Germany, we are based in Bonn, mainly the radio and online department, and Berlin, which is also the town I come from, for TV department. We have now around 1,500 employees from more than 60 countries, so it's a pretty international working atmosphere. We have more than 5,000 partners taking our content, so that's a pretty general approach now. We want partners to take our content and publish it on their channels, because this way we reach people we wouldn't reach otherwise. So we are always interested in getting new partners. And we have a dedicated branch for education, which is called DW Academy, or Deutsche Welle Akademie, which trains more than 1,000 journalists, technicians, and managers each year. Mission statement: most importantly, Deutsche Welle is journalistically independent. This is really one of the core factors, and we provide extensive and uncensored information in countries where freedom of the press is restricted or practically non-existent. So our main target areas are really the countries where you don't have any kind of freedom of press, things like that. So this is where we try to be present. And we see ourselves as a mediator in intercultural dialogue. So this session is mainly about audio and video. This is, I guess, the reason why most of you are here. So, of course, we offer different Deutsche Welle audio and video products. The most important of them I'd like to show to you. First one is the Deutsche Welle Media Center, which is something I guess many people know from other providers. This is it. It's mainly a nice interface where we collect all our audio and video stuff to make it easily accessible for the user to play it back in a convenient way. You can access all our live programming there. You can access on-demand video image galleries. This is, for example, the live stream of Deutsche Welle, of one of our Deutsche Welle TV programs. Hope it loads up. Actually, what I wanted to show is if this would be running. This is one of the first experiments we actually did with HTML5. Since I said this session is about HTML5, I don't have a fancy iPad here, which would be much better to underline it, but you can, of course, also load the Media Center on a portable device, like this is a pretty old iPod Touch, and there you are also able to view our live streaming program. Yeah, you just have to believe me that it works. Oh, now there's actually something loading up. So it's the same thing. No matter if you access the Media Center on a desktop browser, if you access it on an iPod like this, live stream is usually working fine. Yeah, there it is. Okay. So this is the Deutsche Welle Media Center. Currently we have it in Arabic, in English, German, and Arabic. So these are the three languages where it's already available. As I said, our usual website is available in 30 different languages, so we will have a pretty tough job extending the Media Center to all these languages. The next languages planned are Spanish, Farsi, and Russian. for this. So it's a really convenient interface. You could search for items, things like that, pretty similar to the stuff we've seen in the keynote. And yeah, it provides a really nice overview. We have the most current items here on the top, and then we have the most popular items here at the bottom. So even if the user accesses the media center directly, it will have a pretty good idea on what's on in Deutsche Welle. Other things we do, as I said, we have more than 5,000 partners. On the left, you see an example of a video player on one of our own websites, on the major website of Deutsche Welle, so it's integrated into the website, basically. I think that's something that everybody has seen. In the middle, you see an image of a Spanish partner who's taking our talk magazine Quadriga and embedding the player into their own website. On the right, I think this is a Croatian news portal doing pretty much the same thing, taking one of our players, putting them on their website. And so that means our players also have to be scalable. They have to be, it must be possible to modify them. For example, in the middle, you see the player here. He has a kind of list on the right where you can browse through old episodes. The other players don't have something like this, so there needs to be some kind of customization options. What we also do from time to time are specials. For example, Global Ideas, which is a project regarding climate change, its effects, and measures against it. Future Now, which is a scientific magazine, and there's also Coming Home. Also a nice project about people living in Germany, but actually coming from totally different areas in the world and visiting them at their home native country. And again, this is also a website I'd like to show because it also works on iPod, iPad, whatever you have, and also the videos and audios, they can all be played back no matter what kind of device you're actually using. Pretty nice project, really nicely done. So, yeah, big question is for most of the people now, since you're here, why should I care about HTML5? Will there be HTML6 or 7 or 8? So I'd like to give you a brief example of this. I guess everybody knows something like this. You might have it in your bathroom, at least you should. But there are also things like this, where you find yourself sometimes standing in front of asking yourself, well, how do I actually use it? Or at least sometimes it happens in public places, in hotel rooms, where you don't really immediately get the idea. I mean, it's a water tap. Everybody sees that. It's pretty simple. It has a single purpose. There should be water coming out of it. But handling is done differently. You also sometimes see with it like this. You see them like this, okay, pretty much the same, but on the right. But every time it's a totally different experience, I want to call it. I've been to Italy this year, where they have things like this, and I had to search for some time, because there you actually trigger the water by using a pedal on the lower right. So this is quite different everywhere. There's not really a single standard for having water taps. And the good thing is about HTML5, totally different area, that it is a standard, or at least it's almost a standard. It's something that many people, or a majority of people, have agreed on, an implementation that should be consistent among all different kinds of providers. HTML5, you probably know that, is currently at draft status, so it's not a standard yet, but it's already widely used. You can view the specs on the World Wide Web Consortium website. Practically, as I said, it's not a standard. Practically, you can already use it because the implementation is there. The products are there. Good thing if you talk about HTML5 as a product is that it doesn't really belong to anyone. That's the same for every standard. So there is no single company behind it. You can go to the website, do your own custom implementation. It's up to you. This is a very good thing. This is also very important, something we never had in history before. All the current releases of the major browsers support HTML5. So no matter what kind of browser you're now downloading, might it be for a smartphone device or for any kind of desktop system, Internet Explorer and so on, they all support HTML5. And this is very important. And again, if you look back like 8 months, that has not been the case. Accessibility is a very important point. Visually impaired people, for example, might want to access your content, and this has always been a problem for Flash, for example. Because if you put a Flash object on your website, it's basically an alien object to the browser. What the Flash object does is kind of invisible. It could be a video, it could be a charting application, it could be a user interface, it could be anything. The browser doesn't know about it. And so doesn't know a search engine. So if a search engine is trying to index your content, they usually end up when there is a Flash object. So it's not easy to find this. So compared to Flash and Silverlight, either for search engines and for visually impaired people, HTML5 is a far better option. Yeah, this is about user interface. The layout may be adjusted inside the browser. People are used to changing the text size, for example. You press Control plus to increase text size or to decrease it. You use your back button to get back to the previous site. This is also a problem we always had using Flash technology because it usually doesn't work. You might implement it, but it's really difficult. And if something integrates natively into the browser, you can still use all these functionalities. That's also very important for other media center application I've shown before. If we would have built all this inside a Flash application, it would be very difficult for the user to use the back button. You can do it, but it's difficult. Yeah, no need to install a plugin. I think this is also an advantage, both from an administrator's point of view and also for the end users. Once you have the browser, you're good to go. You don't have to install anything additionally. Also, a very important point, something we never had before. We now have open source audio and video codecs with WebM and OGG. WebM as a video format and OGG for radio or audio things. So you know OpenOffice, for example, an Office suite you can download and use. It's all open source. It can be easily modified. You can modify it. Everybody can use it or change it. And that's the same now for these audio and video codecs. So this is really new. We never had something like this. Of course, it's very important to notice that there are some patent issues around it. So there's a patent pool building. However, this is something that has been going on now for 1 or 2 years, and still there haven't been any results. So that shouldn't prevent you from implementing something like WebM. Yeah, from a web developer's point of view, it's very important that HTML5 integrates well with JavaScript and CSS, since these are the standards we use. JavaScript for all kinds of interactivity, user interaction, anything happening on the website, and CSS for the visual appearance, styling, layout, things like that. HTML5 uses this, and basically if you know JavaScript well, you can also build HTML5. This is not a difference. Native browser functions, yeah. It's also very important in my opinion, because if we look back like 5 or 8 years, it was pretty often the case that your browser crashed. Even your operating system crashed, your word processor crashed, everything crashed from time to time. It was normal. I think people didn't even really complain about things. Now this has changed. If you use your computer nowadays, it rarely crashes, I would say. It happens sometimes, but then you really notice. And at least from my experience, when I remember my browser crashed last time, it was usually because of Flash. So since, as I said, it is an alien object, it's not a native browser functionality, it has its own memory management and things like that, so it's very likely the case that your browser crashes because you're using any kind of external plugins. That's the same for Java or any kind of technology. Now, if you put that functionality, like video and audio, inside the browser, this should increase stability as well. Yeah, and we have a great perspective. That's also something pretty new. HTML5, I've listed 2 examples here in the Phonegap project, for example. Those of you who don't know, Phonegap is a project where you can build native applications for smartphones. And they work on iOS, they work on Android, they work on BlackBerry, and so on. And you build these applications in HTML5. So you just use HTML and JavaScript, and then you can export a native application that you can put into the Apple Store. You can sell it, actually. It's not a website, it's really an application. And you just use HTML5 to build it. Really nice. And you get cross-device support. Another example is Windows 8. This is a quite recent announcement that Microsoft said if you want to build native applications for Windows 8, you don't have to use .NET or C#. You can, of course, but you can also use HTML5. So you can build a native Windows application, or you will be able to build it just using HTML5. And this is also pretty important. So I think that these advantages really point out that HTML5 is going to stay. There are some major companies I've listed here that also embrace HTML5 technology. Apple, for instance, I guess everybody remains the famous letter from Steve Jobs saying that Flash is a deprecated technology. But there are also others. Microsoft, for example, found that really funny. They published a HTML5 training, it's in German, on YouTube. It's also something I couldn't have imagined 3 years ago or so. We have Adobe, for example. They also launched an HTML5 extension pack for their web editor Dreamweaver, so they are also embracing HTML5 technology. We'll see more about that later. Google, of course, one of the biggest supporters of HTML5. Actually, the specification is written by a Google employee. They have a really nice introductory presentation. So this is a presentation about HTML5 built in HTML5. Really nicely done. So get a lot of input there. Facebook, yeah, of course, they are also supporting this, so you can build, for example, video players with HTML5 that you can post on the Facebook wall, things like that. So for me, these are the most important companies in internet today. So they're all somehow supporting HTML5, and yeah, this is something you could have seen on the Adobe's website for quite some time. Wheel of choice. I think they also say if people want to use Flash, they should use Flash. If they want to use HTML5, we will build the tools that they want to use, and I think this is a really good approach. Yeah, if a new topic like HTML5 comes up, it's usually important to make up your own mind about whether people are going to use it, if people are actually able to use it. What I did here is a little comparison about browser statistics. This is a good thing about internet delivery. You have statistics. You know what your users have or what they use to access your content, your website. On the left, these are the kind of official statistics from the World Wide Web Consortium in August this year. And all the browsers labeled red, or with a red color, they don't support HTML5, while the green browsers support HTML5. On the right, you see the same statistics for our website. So you see a little difference here. So I would say for World Wide Web Consortium, we have an HTML5 support of almost 80%. For us, as Deutsche Welle, things look a bit different. So we have something between 60 to 70% of our users support HTML5. And this is something I'd encourage you to do as well. So take a look at the statistics. You will have them as soon as you're doing web delivery, and then you can make up a decision. And once I've seen this, it was pretty obvious to me that if we as Deutsche Welle would build an HTML5 application today that doesn't have any fallback for the users that can't use HTML5, we would do a pretty bad job. So this is something you really have to keep in mind. Okay, I've listed some advantages, well, I think pretty many of them, but of course there must be some kind of drawbacks, and of course they exist. I mentioned already that the old browsers don't really support HTML5. This is up to Internet Explorer 8. And the major problem in Internet Explorer is that the recent version, Internet Explorer 9, was just launched for Windows Vista and Windows 7. So Windows XP users that want to use Internet Explorer will not have some kind of HTML5 feature support, which is a bad thing. But Microsoft decided to bring IE9 just for Vista and Windows 7, so this is definitely a problem. There are different implementations. I think everybody has heard about that already. We have different codecs, H.264 AVC, WebM, Theora, AAC, MP3, you name it. They are all supported differently in different browsers. There are no standards for streaming. This is a streaming conference, and I guess everybody is doing some kind of streaming. You don't really have a common standard for streaming. Practically for on-demand content, it doesn't even really exist. DRM is a big issue. There's a nice discussion, sorry, this is a bit cut off. Yeah, from the World Wide Web Consortium, there were people approaching the World Wide Web Consortium asking them, why don't you implement any kind of DRM technology into HTML5? So this is kind of a ticket. And then there's a conversation going on. It's very interesting to read through it because all the necessary arguments are usually exchanged. Basically, if you want to wrap it up, it's like HTML5 is not about DRM. If anybody wants to build a DRM solution, build it yourself. It's an implementation thing. It's nothing that a standard has to deliver. So I guess we are not going to see any HTML5 DRM genuine support. It's up to the implementation, it's up to a vendor, a product. Somebody can build it, there's no problem about that, but it's not going to be part of the standard, I guess. Full screen mode, this is something that's usually forgotten, and that's pretty bad. If you want to build a video player, for example, or at least if I remember myself when I go to YouTube and watch a video, the first thing I press is the full screen button because I want to use the full width and height of my screen for this. This is not really possible in HTML5. It's not possible to create a button that the user can click and then it immediately goes to full screen. It's possible inside the WebKit browsers, which is Chrome and Apple Safari, but it's not possible in Internet Explorer, Firefox, and so on. In Firefox, what you can do is you can right-click on a video and then there's an option, go full screen, and then it's full screen. But I haven't found any way to use this method in a JavaScript way so that I can implement it on my own. So this is a bad thing. You can try to imitate it by enhancing the video to the full size of your browser window. This is always possible. You can use the browser window and expand the video to this, but not everybody is using the browser window at the full image resolution, on the full screen resolution. So it's a workaround, but it's not a solution. 2 points, the performance of Flash is still generally better. For example, if you're doing bitmap data, things like manipulating pixel data, you can say that Flash is generally a bit faster, Silverlight as well. And we don't really have any decent IDEs, so working tools like Adobe Creative Suite or Microsoft Expression for HTML5. So the whole workflow thing that was also part of the last presentation this is not really solved in HTML5. You probably see that the last 2 points on this slide have been grayed out a bit, so I assume that this is going to change pretty rapidly. So JavaScript is getting much, much faster with every browser release, and I'm pretty sure we see decent IDEs for HTML5 development pretty soon. Yeah, this is a nice comparison chart I did, targeting the major operating systems or browsers we have nowadays. You see the 2 different formats which are important in HTML5 today, which are MPEG-4 and Welle, and you see that the different browsers and devices support them in a different way. That's not good, of course. It's not consistent. Mainly it's related to patent issues. I mean, it's pretty obvious. Firefox, for example, is an open source product, and an open source product will never support patented technologies, and MPEG-4 is a patented technology. So I really doubt that this is going to change very soon. I think we have to live with that. There will be 2 formats, and we will have to embrace them both. Yeah, there's HTTP live streaming support, for example, in Apple's iOS and Android in the current release, but there's no desktop browser that currently supports that. So if you want to do live streaming for smartphones, it's possible, but then you have to go another way for desktop browsers. That's also not really good. For audio, it's pretty much the same situation. We have MPEG-4, we have OGG, we have MP3, and all of these formats are somehow supported in different browsers in a different way. Mobile. This is, we've seen some advantages and we've seen also disadvantages. And you can say, okay, the disadvantages, these are too many. I don't really want to bother with HTML5, but the key factor for me is why you should use HTML5 today is mobile. And I just have a little chart for this. The numbers don't really matter. It's just a single figure which I marked in green here. These are the PC sales with desktop, notebook, netbook, and so on, compared to smartphone sales in the first quarter in 2011. So we basically see that there were 85 million sales of desktop PCs and notebooks, and we see that more than 100 million smartphones were sold this year, first quarter. So this is pretty impressive. So we already have, and this is not new, this has been last year as well, there are more smartphones sold, and we know that people use smartphones for web browsing. This is also pretty common. And there are already more smartphones than PC sales, so on mobile devices you have no choice, in my opinion, but HTML5. Because on smartphones, we have support for HTML5 on all current smartphone operating systems. Compare this to Flash and Silverlight, we don't see any wide support there. You have some devices allowing Flash, and some also support Silverlight, but that's very rare. HTML5 is basically available everywhere, and this is a very good thing. RDSP, yeah, last talk was about protocols as well. RDSP is usually the weapon of choice that you use for doing streaming on the protocol level. It's supported on all the platforms in theory, but for mobile applications, it's very important that it depends on the mobile service provider. For example, in Germany, it's only the biggest mobile service provider who supports RDSP streaming directly. All the other providers block it, so you can't do it there. So this is not very good. So that's why I would say that progressive download is practically the only option that is reliable for smartphone delivery. If you're not doing live, if you're doing on demand, you have to accept that you have to deliver your content progressively or as a download. If that's not an option, then probably HTML5 is not an option. Yeah, this is something I already mentioned. Now for creating HTML5, once you've made a decision like, I want to use HTML5, I think it's a good product, how can you actually do it? For development, as I said, I work as a web developer, multimedia developer for Deutsche Welle. I really like to use Aptana. It's a very great tool, very easy to handle. And you basically use the same tools that you would use to build HTML. So there's nothing really new about this. You can use Dreamweaver as well, whatever. So for coding a website, this is not a big issue. You can also do animations, and the very interesting product to watch out is Adobe Edge. This is it's currently in beta status, so this has been released from Adobe for about 6 months, I guess. And basically, this is a stripped-down version of Flash. So it can do the most of the things that Flash can do, but it exports HTML5 animations. So it's just using CSS and JavaScript, and you have pretty much the same animations that you could do in Flash. And it's very easy to handle, and it already does a pretty good job. So if you're talking to the designers, they will usually ask you the question, how shall I create any kind of animation with JavaScript? This is not possible. And this is probably a solution to this. There are two other tools I'd like to mention. The first one is Sencha Animator, and then there is a Tomalt Hype. Also pretty nice tools. They work very well. They do what they should. However, the code quality leaves some room for improvement. Of course, all of these tools are pretty new, so the code that they produce is not really optimized, so it could be better. The animations are a bit slower compared to Flash. So if you're doing heavy animations, fade-ins, fade-outs, you will usually see a difference because Flash is able to act a bit more faster, the compiler's optimized. But as I said before, JavaScript compilers get faster in every browser release. I think the best example for this is Google's Chrome, which really has set a new landmark in browsing speed. It's amazing what kind of improvements they were able to realize. So I wouldn't be surprised if JavaScript is going to be faster than Flash pretty soon. But now this is not the case. Audio and video encoding, yeah. I already mentioned that MPEG-4 and WebM are the most important formats in this area. How do you actually encode it? I think for H.264, MPEG-4, this is not really important. This is not a big issue. It's supported by almost any product on the market, no matter what you use. If your video encoder doesn't support MPEG-4, then you should probably throw it away. This is not a big issue. For WebM, things are a bit different. It's already supported widely. You have, for example, the Sorensen Squeeze that supports WebM. We have the Zencoder, we have FluMotion, and there's a good list on the WebM project website. So there you can see all the tools that are capable of doing WebM video encoding. For us, or at least to give you a best practice, what we do is that we use the AVC baseline profile. So when you're encoding MPEG-4 video, you can usually choose between 3 profiles: baseline profile, main profile, and high profile. And we do our video encodings currently in the baseline profile, because that has the advantage that it works with HTML5, with Flash, with Silverlight. It even supports old iPhones or iPods like this one. So this is, I think, the iPod Touch from the 1st or 2nd generation, and I'm able to view all the Deutsche Welle video podcasts on this one as well. So you can target many, many devices with this baseline profile. Now for browsers or devices that don't support it, you have to add the WebM format, and then you can reach total HTML5 compatibility, and you should be able to have your video playing back on almost any browser or device that you can get today. We are using various tools for the encoding ourselves. One is, for example, Carbon Coder from Harmonic. Other one is Flip Factory. I guess most of you know these kind of products. Flip Factory supports WebM. This is pretty good. However, Carbon Coder does not. And this is a kind of a problem for us because we are using Carbon Coder on many instances and still it doesn't export WebM format. I hope it's going to be added pretty soon, but right now this is not available. So that's a bit of a problem. And another thing to keep in mind is that the VP8 encoding, VP8 is the video codec of WebM. So if you have the WebM format, you usually use VP8 as a video codec and you use OGG as an audio codec. And VP8 is quite slow. It's improved. It has improved already. If you compare it to the first release that Google did for VP8, this was dramatically slow. Now it's somehow good. But if you compare it, for example, to Windows Media Encoding, which is really fast nowadays because codec is established, tools have evolved, and there's lots of support and lots of improvements. The same for H.264. It was also pretty slow at the beginning, but now it's not such a big issue. Since VP8 is pretty new, it's also pretty slow, so this is usually a problem you might have if you don't have lots of encoders. Then you should reconsider this as well. It's going to improve, I'm pretty sure. Since it's an open source codec, everybody's invited to improve that kind of performance issue. So I think in 1 or 2 years, this is not going to be an issue anymore. Audio and video playback. So, okay, we have encoded our video and we put it on a server and now we want to play it back. You don't really have to create your own video player for this. There are several frameworks and platforms on the market. I just listed a few of them. Kaltura, for example, is one. We have the JW player. We have the Popcorn.js, which is a really nice JavaScript framework. Even Microsoft published an HTML5 framework using HTML5 Playback with a Silverlight fallback. So there are lots of options available. For us as Deutsche Welle, we have our own video player. So we build it from scratch. This is a bit, this has historical reasons. For us, it's most important, of course, to have a maximum amount of flexibility, add features, remove features, and so on. We want to have a content management system integration. This is very important. We want to be able to change in video delivery formats, these things. We want to exchange Flash and HTML5, and we have a custom layout and appearance, of course. However, as I said, this is a decision that was made some time ago. If we would build a video player now from scratch, we would probably also use one of the frameworks. It's nothing that you really have to do completely new. It really depends on the features you need, but generally you can use a framework and you will be very happy with that. So just to give you an idea about our current implementation, on the left side you see an image that appears when the user launches the website, and there is a video embedded into the site. Now it's important to note that on this player on the left there is no Flash. So if the video is not running, there is no Flash at all. It's just HTML5, just HTML with a preview image. Now once the user clicks the play button, you will see the image on the right, and the Flash player is loaded into the area where the preview image has been. So the Flash is just loaded once the user actually wants to see something. And the controls there on the bottom, you see the pause button, you see full screen, download, and so on, these buttons, they're all HTML. There's no Flash here. So just the central area is Flash and the rest is not. The main reason why we did it that way is that we want to easily be able to migrate this player to HTML5. Because in HTML5 you would do pretty much the same thing. You would build all the buttons, all the controls in HTML, and just the central area would be a video. It's a video tag. I will show you an example later on. So then you can easily mix Flash and HTML5. It's not a big issue because you just have to replace the central element. All the rest of the controls are the same. Markup, yeah. If you're building websites yourself, there are lots of tutorials. A very good one, or the one that helped me the most, is on caymandesign.com. It gives you all kinds of important issues related to HTML5 video players, what you want to build, what you have to take care about. And I also would recommend to use this with object, since I said our main format today is still Flash. And SwiftObject is a really nice tool that allows you to detect a Flash player inside JavaScript. So what SwiftObject does, mainly it checks if a Flash player is present, and then it also gives you the version number. So if the user has Flash player 9, 10, 11, whatsoever. And then you can switch, so you can make different layout, different markup for different browsers. So this is a really nice tool. It's used widely, so I would recommend it too. There's a code example. This is a bit different from the code example you usually see on the web. What we basically do is that we create a Flash object primarily, because I said Flash is our main it's our main format, and we just use HTML5 if people are not able to use Flash, for example, on iPad, iPhone, and so on. So anybody who's seen something like this before, this might be very familiar. So we have an object loading a Flash player, adding some parameters, and then there is this video tag here. So this is the HTML5 markup for videos, and we can define various sources. And the first source is an MPEG-4 video, and the second source is a WebM video. What happens is browsers that are able to display the MPEG-4 video will display this, and browsers that are not able to do so, like Firefox, they will display the WebM video. It's an automatic rollover. This is really safe to do. So this would be my suggestion for doing a kind of a cross-platform, cross-device, cross-browser player. ActionScript and JavaScript. So this is kind of the last part of my presentation. You probably know that if you're doing Flash development and you want to integrate some kind of interactivity, you have to use ActionScript, which is a programming language, and then there is JavaScript on the regular websites. The roots are the same. This is something many people don't know. There's an ISO standard called ECMAScript, which is basically the foundation, and ActionScript is somehow a dialect of JavaScript. So there are actually not that many differences. And if somebody tells you that ActionScript and JavaScript are different things, or somebody tells you that you have to learn anything completely new if you're doing JavaScript, and this is wrong. It's more or less the same thing. ActionScript 3 is object-oriented programming. This is very good. It's a very important thing because it enables us to exchange code, to make inheritance, and to work in teams, actually. For JavaScript, it's a bit different because JavaScript is not really an object-oriented programming language. You can do it, but you have to do it a bit your own way. It's up to your own implementation. However, for audio and video handling, I just wanted to list some examples, some pretty common tasks you want to do if you build a video player or audio player. You might want to start a video, you might want to seek or jump to a certain point. You might want to get the duration of your video, or you might want to adjust the volume. And on the left, you see the commands that you would use for ActionScript for a Flash player. And on the right, you would see the syntax for JavaScript. There are not that many differences here. It's pretty easy to see that JavaScript is a bit easier in this case. For example, if you want to get the duration in JavaScript, you just type video.duration, and there it is. In Flash, it's a bit more complicated. But as I said, what Flash does, it's a really good object-oriented way. So I don't want to blame Flash here, because actually this is the way you should do it. JavaScript is more some kind of, well, you get things done, but I don't know if it's that much, if it's that reliable. But still, you see, there is a command that is, or there is a toggle that sets the volume. It's called duration. In Seek, it's called in ActionScript Seek, and in JavaScript, it's called current time. But that's mainly, it's all about syntax, but there's not a huge difference all about that. So yeah, that was my session. I think to sum it up, for me, very important points are for HTML5 that first you check your browser statistics, so see what your users got, and then you do a decision. Second part is checking your workflow. What tools are you using to create your multimedia content, and probably choose different ones or check to see if there are any upgrades available. And then you can start implementing it, and there's nothing that should stop you from doing so. So yeah, that was my session. Thanks very much, and enjoy the rest of the conference. And yeah, if there are any questions, then please. Okay, I have no idea if there is a mic, but two of you, please.
Why should it work this time with HTML5? I mean, in the past, HTML 3.2 was pretty much the standard as well. But the problem was around the implementation and different interpretations of Microsoft and Apple. So why should it work this time?
Question was, we had quite a history of HTML, so we had a standard HTML3, HTML4, and so on, and the implementations were different. Like Internet Explorer had some kind of interpretation of HTML, and Netscape or Firefox, they had other ones. So of course you're right, this is still the case. Firefox sometimes handles things different than Internet Explorer. The major things that changed, in my opinion, is that, as I said, we now have a consistent browser support. So Microsoft really made a clear commitment. We want to support HTML5. They even, some people say they dropped Silverlight. I wouldn't say that. Silverlight is still existing, of course, and it's, I think it will always have some kind of market share. But in my opinion, they favor HTML5. They are offering tutorials. They are creating tools for this. They are having a developer area around that. So in the past, I think the problem has always been a bit like Microsoft not supporting standards. And this is no longer the case. They really declared they want to use it, they want to support it, they encourage people to use it, they encourage people to upgrade their browsers. So I think this is a different story now. Generally, you're right. You will always find some details that vary between browsers. So you will have to spend some effort in testing different browsers, something that you usually don't have to do when you're doing Flash applications because they are looking the same in all kinds of browsers. But still, for me, it's a different story. For example, JavaScript, something, also a functionality that varied, CSS. And now we have a certain level that all the major browser vendors agreed on. And since browsers are on every kind of device, this is a huge step. So I would say a huge progress have been made. And HTML5 is kind of a reliable technology, although it's just a draft status. It's not a final status.
Just related, do they make the same commitment towards JavaScript before? Because this is worse than HTML.
No, JavaScript is pretty much the same now among all browsers. I haven't seen any issues now for a couple of years in JavaScript. I mean, I'm doing web development quite frequently, and I'm mainly focused on JavaScript now, and there might be issues, but what's important to know about JavaScript is that usually in web development you use frameworks now. jQuery, for example, you might have heard of. This is something it's so popular, almost everybody is using jQuery. Or maybe there is a prototype, Dojo, things like this. So these kind of frameworks usually give you a certain level of consistency because they have been tested among all the browsers. So if you use jQuery, you can be almost certain that it works on IE, on Netscape, on Firefox, on Opera, and so on. So this is something we didn't have before. So I should have mentioned that, so you're right in this point, because it's always important to use frameworks, in my opinion, because if you optimize your JavaScript by hand for all the browsers, it will take you a lot of time. But frameworks really take that effort for you. So I would really encourage to use these kind of frameworks. You had a question. I think FluMotion has something like this. I think they've shown it last year here at the conference as well, and I think they're doing web and live streaming. But I'm not sure 100%. Yeah.
Are there any solutions becoming available for both advertising or analytics of streaming media?
Question was, yeah, if there is advertising or any kind of monetization things coming up in HTML5. I think this is pretty much related to the DRM issue I mentioned in the beginning, and I guess this is not something that HTML5 is going to care about. HTML5 is a standard defining a video is a video tag and an audio is an audio tag, and that's it. The rest is implementation. So if you want to build a product that relies on HTML5 technology and adds advertising support, you're free to do so. But the standard is not going to define that. And I think that's also not the purpose of a standard. So, of course, I'm not part of a standards committee. Maybe there will be something like this, but I don't think so.
It wasn't so much in relation to the standard, but in relation to implementations or third-party frameworks. And rather than saying I'm going to target one platform, I'm going to target all platforms without doing development 10 times or 20 times.
I personally don't know any solution of this right now, but I'm pretty sure that there's going to be something coming up. Probably there are some companies around in the exhibition that already have a solution for this, but I'm not aware of. Any other questions? Okay, so thank you and enjoy the conference.